Now, mention that you were an Ole Miss grad.
Mhm.
This has been a wild month and change, right, for Ole Miss football. Number one, we're currently in the midst of something. Now, granted, my prediction that Ole Miss will never win the SEC in my life, that one still got a chance.
You got
However,
it.
right?
You nailed it.
It's still there.
Yeah.
But them being one of the last four teams, did
Man.
not see that coming.
Did I.
That is a
Nor did I.
product of a number of factors that allow this to happen. But now we're in the madness of Lane has gone to LSU. Lane wants to still be a good guy somehow and look like he's the benevolent benefactor, and he's letting some of his coaches go back and coach. At Ole Miss, it's only a couple of them. It is clear that Pete Golding hates Lane Kiffin's guts and has been dogging him to anybody who would listen for the last month. Parlayed that into a job that he would never otherwise get because Ole Miss needed to hold this season together so tightly. But now it's here. They have a legitimate chance at winning a national championship, but it all feels crazy. Am I wrong?
No, that's an accurate assessment. Let's be honest. All right, how do I piss my alma mater off the fastest here? Let's be honest. There's some terrible offensive decision making on Georgia's part in that game that led us to this point. All right. I want to start there. Like Gunnar Stockton, it runs one more keeper. They kick a field goal rather than throwing an incompletion. Ole Miss can't drive the field in that game. And that's what should have happened because Georgia, I really think, owned the line of scrimmage in that game. So we're here because of a kind of a fluky ending. And I think even I know a lot of Ole Miss people have reached out and said, wow, we really kind of backed into that. Now, I don't want to take anything away from the play of Chambliss. He was amazing. It was sort of Manziel-esque what they did moving down the field. Kwan Lacey played banged up. Like they are better than I had any idea they would be this season because they're a year expired on the expectation because Kiffin had the more NIL heavy roster last year. Of the front seven, I think 4 started in the NFL this year. They're all gone, though. So they are good legitimately. That is true. Now, you're just going to have to guide me here because I could probably monologue in any direction in terms of like Ole Miss as an identity or what this Kiffin thing is. I think what I can't say enough is that this Lane Kiffin image rehab thing was never real, ever.
I'm amazed that anybody fell for it. He looked like Lane Kiffin at every turn.
Everybody fell for it. And it was a really beautiful piece of like PR craftsmanship. And here's what I mean by that. SEC Network runs this like bespoke documentary about Lane Kiffin. And he's such a card. He's such a goofball on Twitter. And look how different he is with his hot yoga. And he's always making Instagrams with his daughters and all this kind of stuff. What they were doing at CAA was that after last season, Lane knew he could push through and maybe get 8 or 9 more wins at Ole Miss, and enough time had expired from his chicanery, stuff that happened off the field at various stages in his career, to be legitimately considered by an actual SEC power. That's what he wanted, all right? He knew Florida was going to open. He did not know LSU was going to open, all right? The first time I got a phone call about LSU, it was early October, and there was still a lot of disbelief there because of the way that Kelly contract was structured. Honestly, they needed the governor to kind of lose his mind to make that happen. But Lane knew he could get in on the biggest type of job. So this PR effort that you saw, it worked beautifully because it worked both ways the entire time. And here's what I mean by that. He is dog whistling and signaling off to the Floridas of the world. Look how different I am. Look how I've changed. And I keep saying Florida, Bo, because when Florida hired Billy Napier in 22, there was a kind of like an internal mandate amongst every booster and every leader at Florida. We're not evaluating Lane Kiffin. We do not want that headache. That was the PR rep of Lane Kiffin just a couple years ago, coming off of pick a rumor that you know about from a message board. I'm going to tell you as a college football reporter, it's probably true about Kiffin, right? A lot of baggage, and I'm kind of speeding this up so we don't get bogged down. What changed in 3 years was seasons above expectation at a middle-class SEC program, and we know how hard it is to do that, right? So his on-field acumen was starting to improve. It was starting to kind of wash off all this other stuff. Off the field, he still has a lot of things going on, I'll say, but he's able to manufacture this thing, and here's the genius. The whole time this is happening, do you know what everybody in Oxford's saying? We did that. Ole Miss did that. We're such a great place to live, and this is home, and this is such a wonderful, Oxford's such a great community. We healed Lane Kiffin. They bought that so bad, they're still pulling the hook out of their mouth. Okay? Whether they want to admit it now or not, they fell for it hook line. Okay? And you could see him saying it throughout the season. I didn't like the size of the crowd today. I don't like, the fans didn't turn up on time, except all this little ticky tack stuff. You knew he was headed out the door. But what he didn't know was that LSU was going to open. And he also probably didn't know that Nick Saban was going to step in via Jimmy Sexton in the process and say, hey, I know you think Florida's the ultimate destination here. You need to go to LSU. That's a better job. So that's the fast way of how we got here. It was an excellent amount of public relations finesse. Now, in the last 2 weeks, we've seen a really interesting development, which is something that if you cover the sport, Lane is not a grinder. Okay. Lane is not Nick Saban. Lane is not the offensive Nick Saban. And that's what he's tried to do. Do you know how many times he's put his name next to Nick's the last 3 years on TV?
Mm-hmm.
He wants people to think that he is some amazing combination of Pete Carroll and Nick Saban. And he's not really either, because both of those guys, for all their faults, buddy, they work their asses off, right? They're 25-hour days. And that ain't Lane. So what you've seen early on in the portal returns at LSU and in the recruiting process is that Lane doesn't have his guys. This goes back to the assistant coach crisis. When he got to Ole Miss, he was a little slow in recruiting and portal and all that. And then he got Jeff Lebby to sort of be that guy. And then Jeff Lebby eventually turned that into a head coaching job at Mississippi State. Pete Golding, who is much more familiar with Mississippi, played at Delta State. He's from Hammond, Louisiana. His wife went to Ole Miss. That was his guy. That was like his worker bee. He always had a staff underneath him that was kind of doing all this stuff. So he could literally show up on game day and do the sort of flippant, the kind of ingenue BS as an offensive play caller. Now, if it sounds like I'm disparaging him as a coach, I think LSU is going to be successful, but I want to be really clear about this. LSU is going to have much more of an Ed Orgeron experience than the Nick Saban thing they think they're getting again. Okay?
Yeah.
There's going to be one inexplicable 11 or 12 win season for LSU, and they're going to go deep in the playoff, and they're going to be magic on offense. There's also going to be 2 or 3 years, depending on how long this lasts, Bomani, where there is a ridiculous amount of palace intrigue. There is some nasty off-field rumor, and the combination is going to break them in a couple weird games every year, because Lane Kiffin is good for an absolute, let's call it brain fart, of a coaching effort one time. In the 12 games you get a season, one of those, Lane Kiffin is going to make it inexplicably confounding.
Yeah. So a couple things about him and this job as it relates to the previous guys on the job that I think have been lost. Number one, it did not go well for Brian Kelly. It is not because that man cannot coach.
Yes.
Right. This is a job where Les Miles and Ed Orgeron can win national championships, but also a job where Brian Kelly can get shit canned, right? This is not, your mileage may vary on what this job is. I think there's something to be said about Les and Ed and their understanding of, if we get really big guys, I think we'll be okay, right? Yeah. Like there's a certain humility to the understanding of, this is a Jimmy's and Joe's situation. This is what we're going to do. The thing about Les and Ed that I think was very important and that Brian Kelly was not, and what got him in trouble is, and also Nick Saban, those guys are nothing in the positive on this one. Saban, Miles, Orgeron, they are not insincere. That is a place that I think values a certain level of sincerity. Lane Kiffin drips with insincerity at every turn.
Yes.
He better win, and he better win fast, because they will get sour on him quickly.
The amount of emotional distance I think he has to create for his own sanity is going to kill him at any major job. Ole Miss, because of their station in the world, because of where they fell in the pecking order, largely self-inflicted, by the way. We could probably do a whole other hour on why Ole Miss is where it is, but you got to account for about 100 years of history. Ole Miss was willing to put up with that. Ole Miss was willing to deal with the grumpiness. Ole Miss was willing to deal with the guy who blew off the charity golf tournament, who blew off the request to do such and such for the sick kid in the hospital, who wasn't around in April, who wasn't around in March, who wasn't around in August until practice started. They were going to put up with all that. This place, to your point, the thing that they just extended was all of that I just described kind of applied to Brian Kelly too.
Yes.
Brian Kelly gave off this unspoken sort of exclamation that he did not really want to be in Louisiana. He was here as a coaching experiment because he believed Notre Dame was holding him back.
Right.
And we found out he was completely wrong.
Right.
Okay. That he was actually holding Notre Dame back in a lot of ways. What you're getting with Lane now is, I'm going to be really honest. Everything I know about Louisiana, I'm married into a Louisiana family. I know a ton of LSU people. They have everything in the blueprint to be Alabama or Texas or insert magical school here. But they are something terminally fraught about that culture. And
I was about to say, it's all those people from Louisiana are your issue.
It's that combined with the accidental success of Nick Saban at LSU, meaning he came in and he was able to power wash about 4 decades of corruption off of Baton Rouge. And I need to emphasize this. So one of my favorite NFL players is Warrick Dunn. Warrick Dunn grew up in Baton Rouge. Warrick Dunn, he got the hell out of Baton Rouge. He never considered LSU before he went to Florida State. That was never, I asked him about it in person one time at a Falcons game. Hey man, no chance whatsoever. LSU had major race relation issues. It had major economic issues. It had terrible fundraising. The facilities looked like the rest of Louisiana, which is that you stood around and said, where the hell is all the money going?
Well, we wanted to keep the legal drinking age 18.
You see where the priorities are if you go to LSU in 1997. Yeah. So Saban gets there, and by sheer force of will and all that curmudgeonly spirit, he's able to browbeat a lot of that corruption back and create a synthesis of all the talent's here, y'all. It's leaving. You have more talent on these 6 exits of I-10 and I-12. I don't know if I-12 existed then. And they're all leaving. They're going to the Florida schools. They're going out. They're going to Texas. All he did was create the ruthless blueprint that changed college football for 30 years. The problem was he applied that blueprint when he came back to their now arch rival Alabama, right? So the problem is they've been chasing a statue, not a championship, Bo, because Les Miles, championship, Ed Orgeron, championship, right? They have the rings. They've been chasing a statue. And what mystifies me is that since the Ed Orgeron debacle with the athletic director and them not wanting, Ed was a little too rough around the edges and all this shit, and they're making him hire a defensive coordinator he doesn't want to. They kind of broke up what could have been a decent little dynasty. Even after Burrow left, there was enough talent on that roster for them to be competitive. Then they hire Brian Kelly, who we've established is not a fit in any way, shape, or form. And now they're chasing the hot hand and inviting more controversy into a place that breeds its own controversy. In college football terms, going from Oxford to Baton Rouge in a media sense is if you're in the NFL, this is what always worries me about Dak Prescott. Dak needed to be in Jacksonville. He didn't need to be in Dallas, right? Because of the scrutiny. You have gone from the Tennessee Titans media beat to the Philadelphia Eagles. He's going to lose. He's going to lose an inexplicable game, all right? And they're going to eat his ass alive. They're going to scour his Instagram. They're going to find out if there's any funny business on the side, up, down, left, right. They're going to know his status with his ex-wife. I don't think he's prepared for this yet.